What is mindset? Our mindset is based on what we believe, and anything we believe in, we put into motion. I have spent my life putting the mindset of perseverance into motion, and now I am here today to share my journey along with others whose mindsets have changed the course of their lives. Hi, I'm Mindset Coach Lorraine Lindsey, and I believe that if you can change your mind, you have the power to change your life. So are you ready? Welcome to the Mindsetter Show. I am your host, Lorraine Lindsey, and we are here with a very special guest to talk about mindset. Of course, this show is always about the mindset that you have, and we believe here that if you can change your mind, you have the power to change your life. And today we're going to be talking with a guest who has his personal journey with responsibility and the mindset of accountability and how that changed his journey. And I'm super excited because I've been watching this journey, I think almost from the inception. Our guest today is Jesus Neri, and a little bit about Jesus. In 17 years of experience as a mortgage lender, Jesus has led the mortgage department for the Chicagoland Community Bank. He's been named the divisional vice president of a predominant mortgage company, grown a multi-billion-dollar correspondent portfolio, and founded an innovative social movement by the name of Trust the Beard. As a grassroots organization with deep ties to self-development, community advocacy, and at the bedrock of the organization, financial literacy, it is in their soul to help. Mortgage is the vessel they have chosen to empower people and help them navigate this journey. Trust the Beard strives to bring investment programs to minority communities to help them gentrify their neighborhoods rather than waiting for them to be inevitably gentrified. In a hyper-connected and hyper-communicated world, competition is what fuels businesses' desires to succeed. The spirit of competition, unharnessed and unchecked, creates some of the most toxic work environments and fuels corrupted intentions across all industries. As someone who was ultra-competitive, that was something hard for Jesus to accept. Yet his career is based on being the best. His career is based on being the best, but being the best doesn't mean that you are better than anyone. It just means that you're the best of what you do. Therefore, Trust the Beard embodies and supports the elements of creation, collaboration, and contribution, not competition. Trust the Beard will continue to actively help under-resourced groups change the landscape of their community. And whether your path is self-development, community advocacy, or financial literacy, you can count on Trust or the Team Beard to collaborate, and contribute with you. Sorry, the CCC, I was a little mouthful. Yeah. So Jesus, thank you. And today, I want to talk a lot about the Trust the Beard, the brand, what it was, what it is, and how your personal journey has been life-changing for you and for your brand as well, for your business. So I'm going to jump in, ask a couple questions first.
Sure,
of all, how
absolutely.
are you?
Good. How are
I
you?
am so happy to have you here.
I'm happy to be here.
Very excited about this interview. So I'm just going to go right into it, if you don't mind. Okay.
Not at all.
I want you to first talk about a little bit about your actual journey. And I like to call it somewhat of like an awakening, if you will.
Yeah.
And one of the things that you said, and when I read something that you sent to me, that the as within versus the as without. And you said your journey has been about improving your inner world, which in my mind, that what we call it here is your mindset. And that has been instrumental in changing your outer world. So talk to us a little bit about that, please.
100%. And I think sometimes with the things that I post on social, I'm intentionally a little abstract to see, if I can invoke a little bit more thought than just like, putting it out there. So what I realized was, I had this very strange moment it was like in 2019. Work was a little bit rougher than it had been in the past, and the systems that I had implemented were still kind of running that way. My assistants were really, good assistants that I had at the time. And for some reason, my business was just not moving the way that it was, I was going through a lot of personal problems at the moment. I had some bad relationships that were kind of lingering around, and my world just felt very uncomfortable. I'm a pretty like easygoing kind of guy, but in this moment with everything that was going on in my life, there was like constant stress, worried about someone showing up at my door, maybe someone coming to my job, creating a problem for me just because, I hadn't finished something. I created these things. And then that was this moment that kind of clicked for me. I was walking towards the doctor. I went to go see a doctor actually because I felt different about, life, just weird, So as I'm walking, I had my headphones on and I crashed into somebody, right? And in that, there's this like lapse where I kind of black out. And the next thing I remember is I'm punching this guy in the face and I have him against the wall and my hands are all bloodied up and his face is bloodied up and someone screams like, stop, So in this moment that this happens, like I just really felt that like I broke a part of my brain, that there was something that, everything was just so heavy that I couldn't even tell you what that interaction was with this guy. I don't know. And I'm not normally a violent person. Like that's not something that I go out like, hey, I'm a tough guy, gonna beat people up, But in this interaction that I had with this guy, it like the raw side of me came out that, I'm pretty good at keeping, under wraps. I grew up in Chicago, not the best neighborhoods in the world, drug dealer and crackhead on every other corner. And so we grew up a little bit different, and that side of me, I try to keep it as subdued as possible. But because everything else was wrong in my life, I could no longer keep a lid on that.
I can relate to this, by the way.
And then you just explode, right? And then, I end up going to the hospital. They notice that my hands are a little bloodied up. They ask me if I feel okay. And then, these are the times when you have to be mindful of the words that you say. So when I walk in, they ask me, do you feel like hurting yourself or anyone, right? And I said, yeah, because I just hurt somebody, right? And someone rushes in real quick and they're like, hey, sign this paper because you feel like you need some care. We're going to look out for you, make sure you're okay. And in that state of mind that you're in, like, I don't understand what happened to get me to this place where I feel the way that I feel right
Would
now.
you say that it was a moment of being lost?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Where you're just like kind of like on autopilot.
You don't understand what's going on in that moment.
Right.
Like you hear it and then it sounds right. Like, oh, you're going to look out for me? Okay, cool, right? Because I'm worried about something that just happened, right? And what I did is I signed my papers so that I would be committed to a psychiatric ward. I ended up being there for almost 12 days. And it was one of the craziest experiences of my life because that's when I realized that I'm creating my own reality.
Wow. But what was it? Because here's the thing. So you're walking every day. And I can and I bet you a lot of people out there can relate to this, where you're going through your everyday. And especially if you're someone who just takes it on and kind of suppresses and you're like, you're just, your life becomes utterly just busy, and you're just kind of just marching to a drum. You're almost like a robot, if you will, not realizing that emotionally there's this mounting, there's this overpouring that's taking place. So then you snap and you just snap. It's interesting how life kind of brings you to those cornerstones in your life, because it wasn't like you're like, today I'm walking to a place to check in to go get some psychiatric help. So what was it in this facility that you said that you had this epiphany?
So, and it speaks a little bit to the brand of like how, what we used to be to what we are right now. So I've been a person for a very long time that I've been in control of my life. Like, my mom, she was present as much as she could be, but she was a working mom. So then I kind of had to learn to make decisions on my own pretty quickly, I tried to move out of my mom's house a bunch of times when I was a kid because I didn't want to follow her rules, because I kind of had to figure it out in my own head, And I know that my mom struggled with that, because my sister was very compliant. My brother was very compliant, right? And not in a negative kind of way, right? Like mom says to do this and do it, right? Like to me, I always ask the question, well, why do I have to do it?
Right.
And that creates stress. The single mom with 3 kids, So I always wanted to be out of my mom's house, and I've always been kind of an independent person, So with our brand, what it was before was that we even had a little catchphrase that it's not what you want, it's what I want.
Interesting.
And we would apply that to the mortgage business, right?
Okay.
That is like, I remember my assistants would call and tell me, hey, the realtor's saying that we have to close on Friday or they're going to kill the deal. And I would say crazy things, and I would say, I'm the money. You understand that? Without me, you could try to put as many dates as you want on there, but I'm the money, right?
Interesting.
And no attorney can tell me otherwise. And if you guys want this deal to go through, because we have $200,000, $300,000 on the line, then curve to my schedule.
Gotcha.
And that was very divisive because that's not a partnership that you're forming with people. And then, more people didn't like me, right? In
Gotcha.
my industry. So to stay in that topic, you know, when I get to the psychiatric ward, I'm a person who's used to being in control.
Interesting.
And here you have no control
Right.
over anything. And they ingrain that into you pretty quickly where I was in my room, right? And I go to use the bathroom and I noticed what looked like like a splotch of blood. So I asked the nurse, "Can we get someone to clean this up because there's blood inside of my bathroom?" And then she tells me, "How do you know that's blood?" And I'm like, "What?" And I was like, "Cause it looks like." It's like, "Yeah, but what makes you think that that's blood?"
Interesting.
And you have to like, well, and I told her, well, because we're in a hospital, right? And it would be pretty.
It just made sense to
It
you.
makes sense. She's
Right.
like, well, could it be ketchup? Could it be paint? Could it be anything
Now,
else?
was this intentional for them to kind of get you to be more perspective?
Now that in this
Uh-huh.
space that I'm in, I can tell you definitely, right? But in that moment, I was so frustrated. I was so angry because like, how the are you gonna tell me that that's not blood when I know that it's blood?
Right.
But then in her mind, it's like you have no certainty of knowing.
But this
right?
right there, and I'm going to pause that for a second because, again, this is mindset, right?
Yeah.
And when I hear that and when you share that, it's so poignant to a lot of things that we do so subconsciously.
100%.
And we take what we know and we align it with what we assume is the answer.
100%.
When truly, even in just that little example, when truly there are always different ways to look at a thing, right? Even if it's a bottle of water or it's you and I, there's different ways to look at life. That's why you'll have siblings living in the same home, like you said about your siblings. Same experience, but the outcome is different, all because of perspective. So here you
100%.
are in this hospital setting and you assumption, right?
Yep.
For agreements, that's one of them. Never make assumptions that because there is a spot that is a specific color and I'm in this facility based on what I understand, my own comprehension, I'm going to say that's blood. And who are you to tell me otherwise based on what I know?
Right.
Right?
Right.
And so key word that you used was the word control.
Yep.
Which I think is interesting because what you said was, I was so used to feeling there's such an illusion with control, right? Because your whole world, your business, your brand was all about you feeling like you had control.
Yeah.
And yet the thing that ultimately you succumbed to was the lack of. And not realizing that along this pathway, the control that you had was an illusion to the control that you really didn't have. Your world was falling apart. So
100%.
continue. I'm sorry. These are just mindset things, right?
But
okay.
I understand now how it all makes sense, right? Like how all these things led up to what it was at this moment, you know? So when I'm in there, you know, like, yeah, it was very like frustrating, right? To be in that space where now someone else, and then it's the same thing. You wake up at this time, you have to be out of your room, you have to make your bed, you eat at this time, you can't watch TV, you're going to do these programs, you're going to do this worksheet, you're going to participate in these groups. And it's like, what? Like, I'm not crazy. You know, and they're like,
Right.
well, why would you say that? You know, and then you're like, well, because I feel like you guys are treating me like I'm crazy, and I'm not. Like, and then you start to get these identifiers, right? Because then to me, the level of where I was at, I was like, you know, I'm a divisional vice president.
There's your label, right? That
Boom.
This is how I identify. This is my ego. This is who I am.
100%.
Right.
Right? And it's like, you know, I run a multi-million-dollar company. I do this, and I'm like naming all these things. Like, but
we
you
don't
still
care.
have to do this
Right.
exercise, right? And then that's an ego check because unharnessed, right? Like that part of you can run crazy. That part of you can take over your everyday decision. And then that's a very different autopilot that you get into, right?
Right.
And to me, that was this thing where I was like, well, what do I do, right? Because like it's not working, and nothing that I've done, me being a top producer in the country, me, you know, being on getting awards, like getting recognitions, all none of that matters right now, like none of it. And what it really made me do was like shut up, like really, really, for the first time in my life, Lorraine, that it was like, just shut up.
To be still and know is a powerful thing, but it takes a moment of quietness to be still to get clarity in that, right? And when you have a busy world, and I can totally attest it because I keep myself very, very busy. There are times when I have those moments where I feel like I'm going to have my breakdown or I'm having one. And then in order for me to really overcome it, I have to be still to so the breakdown can turn to a breakthrough.
Sure.
So my question then for you is, at what point in this 12-day experience was your breakdown enough for you to have that breakthrough?
So I thought I was like kind of following protocol, right? I just stayed quiet, listened to them, take the meds that they gave me, paid a little bit of attention in these classes that they were giving me because it seemed very rudimentary to me. Like,
Okay.
this is stuff that everyone knows. This is common sense stuff, right? Like, if you're nice to someone, someone's going to be nice to you. If you're mean to someone, but when I'm in this group setting with people, you could see that there's people that didn't really understand this concept because their life has been, everyone's always been mean to me. Everyone's mean to me, right? Like, how am I going to be nice to anyone? Everyone's always trying to take
Was
something.
that your perspective? Like, is that how you felt?
100%.
So you felt that people were mean to you. You didn't feel like No, you
The
said people
person,
there.
yeah.
Okay.
There was other people that were in the group.
Okay, that felt that way.
Right.
So they had they were victimizing themselves.
100%.
Okay.
And then there was some people, Lorraine, that like, for as much as, they had mental learning disabilities, and in that you see how that segment of the population is still affected by stuff like this, even they're not exempt from it just because of that. And like, I'll give you an example. There was a woman there that was with me. She was probably like 6'4", tall, and she was talking about how her boyfriend beats her, and he's a small dude, and going through that whole process, and you not really understand, but then hearing her story a little bit and realizing that it's lack of resources, like they don't have an option, and then they get stuck in this cycle.
And again, it's mindset, right? It's like the elephant in the circus.
Mm.
If the trainer puts it on a rope its entire life, the elephant feels that rope keeps it. So then when it grows and becomes this gigantic, majestic animal, it's still under the idea that it's still held by the rope. So 100%. In that example, you've got this woman, 6'4", with this smaller man that's beating her, but there's a mindset that has her chained to an idea that abuse, she probably could have beaten him up, but she was like the circus animal in a way. And I think we are all of that, many of us in our lives to some extent. What is the chain that holds us, that is the invisible chain? It's not really, we're not really bound to it, but our mindset has kept us locked to it.
100%.
So what would you say was your invisible chain?
Yeah,
right?
That's exactly. That's a great transition.
What was that for you?
So when I'm in these groups and I'm listening to people, where I realize that some people, it's more of their environment that's creating this problem for them than it is their own knowledge, right? And then in there, you appreciate the lack of knowledge, right? So what I started thinking about is like, what have I done in my life? And for me, it was success. I had this chain around my ankle of success.
The golden handcuffs.
100%.
Yeah.
And then, it starts with the idea that, first that you need a ton of money to be successful, right? And then within our industry of the real estate and the mortgage industry, at certain companies, the idea that you have to be the number one producer like really gets embedded in people's mind, and that's where this competition spirit comes in, right? So then for me, what I've told people now is that success was the greatest place to hide, because I knew other things were wrong. I grew up in a rough neighborhood. My mom and dad, like I had a terrible relationship with my dad, and there was a lot of stuff that I knew bothered me, but in my mind I was like, well, F it, right? Like I'm gonna be so successful that those things won't matter to me.
Right.
I'm gonna put so much attention and money on this that this won't matter to me,
And you know what's interesting too? It's that the keyword success. When I coach people, when I talk to people, one of the things I want to know is define it. How do you define what success is? And you said something that, money equates that. Now, you and I are similar in our pathology, rough childhood. I was a fatherless daughter. I grew up in poverty, and I was a teenage mother. I was a young mom, and the grind was, I have to make money, because I looked at it as a way out, as a means, right? And success to me, like what you're saying, was the same thing. Success for me was driven by, my son has to be better than my outcome, but being bound to that. And using suits of armor that I created, right? Lorraine's independent. She's headstrong. She's aggressive. Not knowing that those were things that were protecting me throughout my life, using those as ways to become successful, and then feeling incredibly unfulfilled.
Oh.
Yeah.
100%. Like the difference are the adjectives, but the journey that you've gone through with that is the same as mine.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, like the ones that defined me was that Jesus is super competitive. Jesus is like cutthroat. Jesus, like, at no mercy 10 you want to
I
say
like
that
that he's in
conflict.
the past tense.
Right.
Uh-huh.
100%. Because those things, I realize exactly what you said. They're armor that you put up because of how inadequate you really feel.
Right.
And then you do get to that part in life when you buy everything that you've ever wanted and you're on vacation to the place that you've gone, and then you're like, why do I still feel sad?
Right. It's so crazy. God, this is good. Because perceptually to the outside world, and again, similar stories here. When people see me on the outside, they see a woman who has made it, right? I've had the big houses. I've had the beautiful cars.
Yeah.
My son is doing very well. I'm traveling all over the world. And monetarily, I'm fine, right? I know how to do those things.
Yeah.
But the key was, how do I get to fulfillment in my heart? Am I traveling all the time? Am I picking up and going? Am I keeping myself busy because I'm unhappy? Because I'm empty? Because I feel alone? Because I feel misunderstood? What's really happening here? And what am I not dealing with while the world is perceiving that I'm great?
Right.
And here's the caveat to that. With me painting this picture of this perfect world, no one ever asked me, are you okay? And there are times when I need people to say, are you okay? But at the same time, too, I don't really want them to ask. So would you say that you kind of tapped into that with this whole creating this, this mirage around you? Even though they were tangibles, it was a mirage to really what was happening on the inside.
100%. And then like exactly what you were saying right now about how we put these things up, right? So for me, very similar. I didn't grow up with a dad, right? And then sitting in this, so here we'll go back a little bit. So at the psychiatric ward, that's when I realized that it was more important for me to listen than it was for me to talk.
Okay.
That none of the people here gave a shit about me being a top producer or the number one in the country or any of that. No one cared. On the contrary, they wanted to ask me questions about how did I know how to fill this stuff out, because they didn't know how to do it.
Interesting.
So the value proposition of who I was changed a lot, because at the end of that was, I think, the first time that I ever really made an effort to show empathy and humanity towards people. Because in the past, it was another thing where, like, I didn't respect anybody, Lorraine. Like,
Wow.
unless you were more successful than me, I wouldn't listen to you. Like, I didn't care what, you had
And
to
why
say.
is that, do you think? What was the arrogance behind that?
So
What were you protecting?
it was the fact that when I was a kid, I never got my dad's approval.
You were not enough.
Right. So now I had to be massive enough. I don't care how much you hate me, whatever, like, you have to respect me because of the things that I've accomplished in this monetary level, right? Like, that's enough for me to, like, hide. And that's why I tell people, like, success is the best place to hide, because I never had to deal with any of those things, because if I was a top producer, everybody loved me. I got awards. I got that idea that I was loved, right? And then I got recognition because I got put on panels and I came out on magazines and all that. And then with social media added on top of there, right?
Right.
Now you put a little production behind there, you start getting a few hundred likes, and that creates another thing of like, well, I must be good enough because everyone there says that I'm good enough.
But I know there's a lot of people out here that are like that.
Yeah.
What happens to a person that way when the rug gets pulled from underneath them? Because I have seen the rise and fall of people and how incredibly detrimental it is to them and their emotional, mental health, to their physical being.
100%.
Do you feel that we've got, the beard going to a psychiatric place? I mean, disappearing off the planet. We don't see him. Where's he at? What's he going through? And then boom, he shows up and he's like, kumbaya, so to speak.
Sure.
Were you worried that the perception and the world that you had created was going to reject this new version of yourself?
Ooh, I think I'm pretty fortunate to be kind of deaf to a lot of things in life.
Okay.
Because of the hard things that happen, and then in appreciation more now, because I can tell you that I've prayed for the problems that I had in the past and compared to the problems that I have now.
Interesting. Elaborate on that. What do you mean by that?
So because I've already survived those really bad days, I know the formula to survive them. And the new things that are coming up in my life are very, very different. and it requires me to be more strategic in the planning that I do. It requires me to be more mindful, more intentional in these things. And it's a lot of strain on your mind. It's that little funny quote that people say, like, ignorance is bliss.
Right.
Because
It really is.
like, I didn't know before that I was doing stupid things that I was supposed to. And now in the place that I'm at, I'm very conscious of everything that I do.
So one of the things that you when you sent me, when your assistant sent me your bio and things, massive accountability. You use that you as a way that was a very integral part of this journey that you're on now.
Yeah.
And it kind of sounds like that. So my question for you is this with massive accountability, because I truly am a big proponent of accountability.
Yeah.
I feel like it is a lock and key to a lot of where we end up in our lives, right? And there's accountability, and then there's over accountability. Sometimes we pour it into other people and we make excuses for other people.
100%.
But to just be massively accountable, what did that mean to you? And how did you know what to be accountable for? Because one of the things you just said was, I didn't, there were things that I just didn't know. I wasn't aware that this was my behavior. You were just kind of beating to your drum.
Mm-hmm.
So at what point did you have this realization, like, okay, I'm not really being accountable here, and then wanting to be massively accountable?
Yeah. Once I got out of the psychiatric ward, the diagnosis was tough. I had never heard some of the words that they were thrown at me, and the amount of pills that I had to take, so I was taking maybe 15 different medications twice a day.
Wow.
Right. And it was heavy stuff, lithium, a bunch of mood stabilizers, like very, very difficult, and it really made me feel like someone has sucked the color out of all the world.
Wow.
So walking around like that just puts you in a very different state of mind. So then the diagnosis comes back and they tell me that I'm bipolar, that I have PTSD, that I'm borderline schizophrenic.
So new labels.
Just hitting me.
Divisional vice president.
Right.
And those were your labels, and now these are your labels.
And now these are them.
Okay.
Right. And
continue.
Then multiple personality disorder. And I'm like, what? Like, when did all this happen that I'm not aware of it? But then they start to explain to you, about how, do you have a lot of ups and downs? And then I'm like, well, that's dictated because of my business, like, and they're like, well, that's not how your business should be run. And then they give you different times of where I can tell you that I got a big paycheck and I spend all that money before the weekend was over, right? So
I've
just
done
like
that too.
Very manic behavior of like, getting this instant gratification, So I can tell you that at the moment I was very frustrated with the doctors because I felt like, that they were doing something to me that was wrong. I gained a lot of weight, like my head hurt all the time. But being on this side of it now, I realized that I was so broken. Like they gave me the glue to just hold the pieces that were kind of holding together inside of my head. And while maybe the medicinal route with, traditional medicine may have not been the path that I decided to take, I'm still grateful for them for walking me through that process because I was in the dark. I was in the dark and my life was a mess, So what ended up happening with the massive accountability part of it is that, it goes back to the idea that we create our own world and that being a fact, right? So I started doing a lot of research on these diagnoses.
So would you say that, I'm sorry to interrupt you, just because I know there's people who need to hear this. Was that your starting point though? What was the moment where you're like, I need to be more accountable? What triggered you to even want to do the research?
I wasn't happy. It was this thing where, like you said, these new identifiers got put onto me. And to me, it was like, there's no way. There's no way I'm that. There's no way I'm that, And I had heard people tell me before, Jesus, you're crazy. Like, I've never met someone like you. You're crazy. And then, like, trying to, like, not go into that space, but then calling those people and be like, hey, remember when you called me crazy, bro? Like, do you remember what we were talking about? And they would tell me, yeah, man, you have all these great ideas and they come out of everywhere. It's like, but there's just too much for us to deal with it. And then sometimes it feels like I'm talking to 3 people at once.
Interesting.
And then you're like, shit, like maybe this is part of it, right? And then so that part made me like wanna disprove it. So that's why I did research, right? Like, because I feel like in science, facts only prove things that haven't happened. You know what I'm saying? Like it's not any truth behind it. It's just something that. So I just started doing a lot of research and pulling stuff out, And then I can tell you that the same thing with the partner that I had at the time. Like her and I were constantly fighting, and I couldn't understand what was going on in my life there. My business was falling apart. So it was all these things that it was just like, I got to start somewhere, and this is the closest string that I can hold on to. And I just started pulling on it. But then rather than being responsible in that moment, I can tell you that what those diagnoses did gave me an opportunity to avoid responsibility.
Interesting. Why is that? Because now you had a new label.
Right.
I'm this way because of this.
100%.
I got an excuse because of this. This is why I'm
100%.
so against labels.
100%.
Even, and I understand that there are people who definitely need diagnoses and treatment and things like that, and I'm not opposed to any of that. But we have to be very careful, mindful of how we attach ourselves to our labels, good and bad or indifferent.
Yeah.
It's because we create a character based on these labels.
100% right. And
so continue. That's interesting. You said that. You're like, okay, these new labels that I have, because the other labels that you had, which is interesting, it's ironic, they created a lot of responsibility.
Ton.
At least with your business, right? And now here you are saying, I don't have to be responsible at all because I'm this, and that.
Yeah.
So, okay, continue. This is good. It's interesting.
So the one that they told me was the most predominant, right? Like the one was bipolar 2. So they said I'm bipolar 2. So I started doing research. I got some books online. I watched a ton of YouTube videos. And the underlying message was that of it's like, you know, and I'm, again, right, like I'm not a doctor. You know, I don't pretend to be a doctor. This is just like the accounts of my experience, you know. But what I heard in those things was like, so one of the things, like if you date someone who's bipolar, right, be prepared that you're going to get cheated on. 90% of people who are bipolar 2 end up cheating on their spouse. You know, it's a guarantee. And to me, I heard, I get a free pass, right? I'm crazy.
Interesting.
Right? I'm crazy. I get a free pass. And then, honest with the person that I was with prior, that's what happened. She caught me cheating on her. She caught me with someone else, right? And then I just hid behind this one. And I
now,
said,
was this after you came out and you had these new diagnoses?
No, this was like prior, just a little bit prior to all this happening,
okay.
right? And this was part of like the chaos that was in my life that, you know. So then I remember she tells me, she's like, I don't want that in my life. Like I can't accept that in my life. And then it's so divisive because then online and stuff that you see, they say, you know, if the person who's in your life doesn't understand that this is part of your, you know, condition, right? Then they may not be the right person for you, because that person wouldn't get mad at a cancer patient for losing their hair as part of this process. And it's so easy to like fall into that.
That is so profound because, yeah, like the in that scenario, there's no accountability.
None.
Yeah, you're just like, well, they don't understand me.
Right, and then you can
This
hide.
is part of the process. Yeah, wow.
Right?
Wow.
So that moment happens, right? But then, you know, her and I were constantly arguing, constantly fighting. And then that created more stress in my life that
because did she choose to stay with you after the infidelity?
Yeah, she stayed with me.
And so she has that lingering for her,
right?
Which obviously causes a constant fight and bicker and yeah. Continue.
And then more so because then I have a convenient excuse of not to be accountable. Right? I don't even have to apologize to you based off of what YouTube says and the doctors say and these books say. And how dare you even ask me for an apology? I'm crazy. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And then that creates a big problem because, again, right, like I feel like in any moment, so this is when it starts to happen, right? When I start to not feel the way that I want to because, you know, I can tell you like these are other little like little mountains that we climb, right? That we can plant our flag on. This girl was probably the prettiest girl I've ever dated, right? Super hardworking, all about my business, supported me a ton, right? Used to clean up my house for me, bring me food, send me stuff like little packages, super sweet. Like if I can tell you that there was a moment in my life when I wrote these things down in my head of like, you know, if I had a girl like this, oh man, I'll take over the world.
You know, here's what's ironic, and we all do this again. As I listen, I go into my little coach mode. When we have a belief system, a mindset that we're not enough. So from the time you were young and you weren't enough for your father and you rebelled against your mother who catered to you and did all these things for you. Yeah. But she was never going to be, if your father didn't give you the feeling of being enough, then you created this idea that you were not enough. 100%. And so you hid behind these illusions, right? Fighting anything that was going to make you feel sufficient. Yeah. So here you get this woman in your life that checks off all the boxes.
100%.
But you cannot receive what you are not. Right?
Yeah.
And so this whole time you're like, I have everything that I want in my grasp. But if you were feeling like you weren't enough for her, then you were going to sabotage that relationship.
All day.
Even though she was the quintessential woman for you.
In my mind, right? Yeah, like, that's you know, like, and that's what I tell people now, right? Like, be careful what you ask God for because you're going to get it.
Oh, yeah. There's a, I I had a scenario in my life when I met my ex-husband, and I was in an interesting phase in my life as a woman. I thought that I was definitely enough in my mind,
Sure.
but I certainly was not in my soul and my spirit because of things that were undealt with in my childhood.
Yeah.
So when I attracted this energy, this man into my life, it was probably the greatest heartache, one of the biggest challenge. But the funny thing about it is when I met him, I was so smitten and infatuated by who this man was that I created this ideal about
Yeah.
what he was going to be in my life. And I prayed for him to be my husband. And I said, God, I want to marry this man. And one of the most valuable lessons that I learned is that you cannot mistake God's passive will with his permissive will.
Oh, that's good.
You know?
Yes.
Because it's like the genie in Aladdin. You rub the lamp and you ask for the wish. And it's like if your intentions and you're not understanding your heart and who you are, when you ask for something, it'll be either what it is to fulfill your life or it'll be the greatest lesson for your life.
100%.
Passive versus permissive.
100%.
So I learned that lesson
Yeah.
in
And
a very hard way. So continue.
Yeah, very similar to that, that I was infatuated with this girl, like I thought, but I wasn't enough. And what I realized was like
You were enough for her, but you weren't enough for yourself, would you say?
100%. Yeah, yeah, cuz she was great with me. But what ended up happening was that I realized when things in other aspects of my life were out of control, I looked for a control mechanism as much as I could.
Interesting.
Right. And because when I was a kid, my mom wasn't around as much, I craved that like consistency.
Gotcha.
Right. And because she wasn't there, we stayed with aunts who weren't the best to me. I ran into a lot of problems with them. My grandmother and I had a lot of conflict, so when I needed that, like consistency, it wasn't there. And then very early on as a kid, I realized something that if I wanted my mom's attention, all I had to do was be bad.
Interesting.
Because when I got good grades, because I was, I've never liked school, but I've done well in school, so straight A student, like I got, skipped a grade, like all kinds of different stuff that happened. But when I would come home with those things, no one gave a shit. But the moment that I punched little Jimmy in the mouth and I knocked his teeth out, my mom was there faster
Right.
than a lightning bolt.
What interesting pathology, though. And wow, you talk about the women and your belief system about women, right? And so here you have a woman who you craved. The way she shows up is what you craved as a child from a feminine energy.
Yep.
And you were just still a little bit, you were being bad anyway.
Terrible.
Crazy
right?
pathology. It's so, again, as we talk about mindset, this is something that I really try to beat into people's minds through this show. And the reason why I do this podcast is because it is so incredible what we have subconsciously built, this template for our lives, if you will,
Yep.
of who we are and how things show up and how much rescuing and healing we need in our adult lives and how we get stifled, right?
Yeah.
There's that 10-year-old child that didn't feel like they were enough, or that 15-year-old that felt that they didn't belong. And because we didn't get the healing we needed emotionally, our emotional IQ shows up in our adult life as who we are. So here we are playing adult and doing everything. We could be an intellect. We could be very logical in our thinking. We could be perceivably very successful, but emotionally, where are we? And I did an interview with this lady. Her name is Megan Buckley, and she's a relationship coach. And one of the things that she teaches people is to say, there's different components to your life, but who you are, whether you realize it or not. So if your relationships are always failing, inevitably, so will your business, because who you are is showing up in every aspect of your life.
Yeah.
So I want to go into we talked a little bit about success. What was your definition of success then? And you kind of tapped into that. But what would you say your definition of success is now? And how has that changed the Trust the Beard organization?
Yeah. Good question. Great question. I can tell you that my definition of success prior to me doing a lot of introspective work was, I think, what everybody thinks, right? Like a lot of money, fancy cars, pretty girls, vacation, that life, going out every weekend with my friends, spending a ton of money, like indulging, in access, right? Like I can tell you that I think not so much I think, I know everything happens for a reason now, because even with that, I used to have a little catchphrase that I would tell people, and it was like, because people would tell me, you can have fun, but have moderation, right? Like, there's nothing wrong with moderation. And I remember, like, literally telling people, like, moderation is for cowards. Like, anything worth doing is worth overdoing.
Do you believe that now?
Not at all.
Not
Well,
at all,
in a
right?
very different,
But in a very different way.
like, lens, but in that moment, that's what I thought success was. Like, for me to be able to get whatever I wanted whenever I wanted. I walk into a restaurant, you don't have a table for me. I'm gonna throw you some cash and you're gonna give me a table, right? Like, having that illusion of power and, like, network of people who, kind of are like at your beck and call, right? That you
Right.
decide that you want something. So like that, that was like this success level that I had. And there was a moment when I touched it. When in Chicago, I could go into any club and I didn't never had to wait in line. And there was a VIP table for me whenever I wanted it to. And I could go and move around however I wanted and leave one girl here and go to another restaurant over here and just be, like this guy who, I thought was super cool. And like, everyone wanted to be like me. And I was like, this guy's a dick, bro.
Right.
Like, like he's the worst. Like, he's the worst at this. And it's only been through this like lens that I could see myself prior that now I can tell you the definition of, for me, success is, is love.
Now it is.
Now, in anything that we do, the only thing that ever works is love. Because I can tell you that even with all these identifiers that got attached onto me, whether, they were positive or negative, that they were bringing something down in my life, it's like that little analogy with the glass of water, right? So you fill it up with a whole bunch of things and perceive the water being you at your purest self, right? So once those identifiers start coming in, they start filling your cup with stuff and it makes your water less pure. But if you grab a jar of water and pour it all the way into that cup, all that stuff comes up and it goes back to zero. It's still clear. Regardless of what the identifiers were, regardless of the negative things that happened to you in your life, if you pour love into whatever that is, you can push a lot of that negative stuff out, if not all of it.
And how do you do that? How do you, and I know the answer from my perception, of course, but because I do believe that love is it's light and darkness, and I don't mean it from external, like you said, what was it? Within versus without. It's not external love. Love is an internal thing. It's a eternal thing, if you will, and it's a form of abundance. But how do you source that love for yourself? How did you get to the point of understanding that what you pour into
is what you get?
It's what you get, and for you now, saying success for me is being able to pour in love. As your example. How did you get to that space, and do you feel like you have that level of self-love now in your life?
I'm working on it. Short answer with like the self-love.
Good. That's honest.
I'm working on that part. But I can tell you that it happened. It's almost like a movie reel that just went across my face one day. I was in such a bad mood. My ex, she had a daughter, and that was the first time I ever dated someone with a child. And to me, like, and that was one of the rules that I had. I didn't date girls with kids just because I knew, my mom had a husband and that part was difficult for me. So I never wanted to be that person to somebody, right? And I understand that as in a relationship, right, there's a lot of attention that's required, but you got to be a super secure dude to date someone with a kid because you're never going to come first, and you got to be okay with that, and then not ever make it a competition where you need to come first, but understand that in order to be in this dynamic, everyone comes first, right? And for me, I'm first because of my career, because of the way I have to be first. And if I'm not first, I'm not good enough. So that created a lot of so in this day that I was like just in a bad mood, like I realized that nothing that I wanted, Lorraine, I had. Nothing that I wanted.
Well, what did you want?
That's when I started like redefining what I wanted, right? That it was like, what you have a beautiful house, you have a beautiful girlfriend, right? Like for all intents and purposes, everything should be, gumdrops and lollipops. So what is it, right?
Like that.
And I just was
you were empty,
sad, like
you were unfulfilled,
profound sadness of like, if I died today, the closest people to me might remember me for a little while, And that was this thing where I started like struggling with that, like, man, like, and I heard this voice. I was like, well, why do we have to be that way? And that's what kind of started clicking this journey into. So my birthday comes around. Me and my ex take a little vacation to Florida with her daughter. We go for my birthday. If you know me, the water is my favorite place to be. If I can be about the ocean, I'll be about that ocean life my whole life, So we get to Florida. It's the day of my birthday. Um, and I'm having this like struggle with like all this medication that I'm taking because it looks like, the Smarties,
Mm-hmm.
just like a handful of Smarties like I'm
Right.
taking every day, and I just couldn't, and I had been arguing with my girlfriend for a little bit, and I just felt terrible about just everything. I wasn't happy with my money, I wasn't happy with work, and I hear a voice inside of my head that says like, give me a chance, man. Like you've never given me a chance. Like don't take those pills. Like
Mm.
give me a chance.
What would you say that voice was for you?
I had already been taking them for a year, right? So the doctors had told me, this is gonna help get the voices out of your head. Because I had talked to them very specifically about hearing different voices in my head, but then that's the diagnosis that comes in. Oh, that's probably like the multiple personality disorder.
Mm.
Oh, that might be bipolar, right? That could be because you're borderline schizophrenic. Like you're not
So
supposed.
now you are contemplating even listening to the voice because you're like, it's got to be because of these labels.
I legit grabbed these pills, Lorraine, and said in my head, well, this is what they're supposed to do. They're supposed to shut you up. You got to go, buddy. And I take them, right?
Oh, wow.
I go to bed and I woke up the next day and I just felt terrible, And again, I hear this voice, and like this time it was loud, and it was loud to the point where it's like I could, if I had speakers, you could hear it coming inside the concert that was going on, right? And I'm just like, what? And it's like, and it tells me, you're fucking killing me, bro. You're killing me. So something made me throw the pills out. We go to the beach for my birthday. I'm hanging out with them. I roll a quick little J. They're in the water playing, and I was like, I'm gonna smoke this, and then I'll hang out with you girls. So I lay down, I'm smoking, and then I close my eyes and I just start like thinking about my life. How did I end up here? How did I get here to this place, right? And then I hear them, and they're sweethearts. I mean, these girls gave me diabetes. How sweet they were, like they're screaming at me in the water, and they're like, "Come on, Papa, get in the water. It's it's beautiful." And it was like a 90-degree day. When I get up and I open my eyes, there was no color in the world. None.
Wow.
It was gray. It was dark. It was sad. And I could see other people really happy, like, on the beach or whatever. And I could see my girls in the water, like, having a good time. And in my head, I'm like, why in the place that I'm supposed to be happy am I not happy? And it's like, you're doing this. You're creating this world. And then that just set me on this journey where I was like, I can't keep being this way because I'm the one that's making all these problems come up. The reason my girl acts the way that she does with me is because I cheated on her and I ruined the trust that her and I had.
Right.
This is my fault. This is my responsibility, right? I can't expect her to have any solution for this because she didn't create this problem.
Right.
So how am I going to keep going down this path?
God, that's so deep. That makes me so emotional. Like, it's those moments right there, like even for me, that touches me because of my own personal relationship of just needing that person to have that level of accountability to say, we're not in this situation. I needed you to be accountable, and to see that the distance that I'm having from you and the problems that we're having is because I don't trust you, and not with necessarily infidelity, because there's different ways of trust.
Breaking trust.
But
yeah.
I didn't trust what it was. And so it just touches my heart because it's so profound for all of us that if we just see the gray in our life, right? And to say that, here's a canvas that's gray. Why aren't I picking up the crayons or the color and painting this canvas the colors that I want? What is my role? What is my responsibility? What is the accountability to say, why am I here?
Yeah.
So that's really deep. I didn't mean to interrupt you, but it was very touching to hear that because it's moving. It can change your trajectory completely 100%. Because then, ironically, the person who was hungry and craving control, that's how you get your power back. The control is in you.
Yeah.
How do I see myself? What can I be accountable for? How can I contribute? How do I be abundant? And that's where control is, because your control is what you're able to give.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. And to stay on that theme, it was a lot for me, Lorraine, that I started looking at everything then. Like really looking at everything, like why the rest of my life was a mess. And anytime that I would point a finger at somebody, I would point it back to me. Anytime that I found an excuse of like why it was someone else's responsibility and not my responsibility, I just kept trying to like consume that. Like, no, it has to be me. Because exactly what you just said, that's when you realize that like you're writing this movie. You're the one that's writing the script. Why would you let anyone else put their pen in your script
right.
of what you want in your life?
Right.
And then I started like writing a lot because when I was in college, I wanted to be a writer, and I like writing. It's very, very therapeutic for me, And I gotten away from that for a while, so I started writing some stuff down, and in those things that like you get into this deep thought with yourself, and you say, if you have everything that you wanted, or if you have everything that you want right now, and the method that you took to get here got you this, well, congratulations, right? Like, congratulations, you found the right method. But if you can honestly look at yourself and do an inventory check and say, I don't have anything the way that I want it, or there's something off of the way that you want it, I promise you right now is the time to change. Right now is the time for you to do that the opposite way of what you're doing, because it's not working. And you're not going to get another crack at this. So right now, push that moment, right?
Absolutely.
That's the part to me that it was like, why would I delegate responsibility for my life to anybody else? That's that one task that you have to take ownership, be the CEO, be the president, be the whole nine. Because in the moment that you decide, well, it's not my fault that I cheated on my ex-girlfriend, it's actually my bipolar disorder. Now I have to wait for bipolar disorder as a disease to come up with a solution why I should stop doing the stupid shit that I'm doing.
Right.
And that to me was too much. Like, when did I get so comfortable with giving so much delegation to the way my life is
You
run?
were just giving your power away.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
100%.
Wow.
It's so deep. All right, man, it's so good. I it's like I'm gonna have to go back and rewatch this program because there's so many golden nuggets in it. All right, so I'm gonna transition a little bit here, because we could talk about this all day. It's like, seriously, but I do want to transition a little bit. Because the second part of my question was with the success.
Mm-hmm.
What Trust the Beard was before,
to what it is now,
and what it is now, because this journey absolutely transitions that. And I want to put up this PowerPoint because these are kind of the 3 C's, if you will, for Trust the Beard. And that is, let me get my little notes here. Creation, collaboration, and contribution. And so I want to read this a little bit while this is up. And it's, you said it's not about competition. This is the driving force behind Trust the Beard's every move. You are about innovation, empowerment, service, compassion, and is it equity over equality?
Equity over equality.
I love that, because at first I was like, is it equality over equity? But no, it's equity over equality. And gosh, creation, collaboration, contribution. Those 3 words in and of itself are words that represent love and abundance, right?
Yeah.
Because you can abundantly create whatever you want to create on any level, right? When you collaborate, it means you're coming into community, right?
Yes.
And then contribution, it is an act of giving.
Yeah.
And so it's interesting to you when you were talking earlier and you said, here's this water, and I had to learn to pour love into it. Yeah. It sounds like with those 3 C's, that's a way of pouring love into Trust the Beard organization.
Yeah.
So I want you to kind of expound on that, on why this has trumped competitiveness, which is another C.
Yeah.
And I just want to add this little thing, because I've been in sales and marketing, and I've been a beast in my world.
100%.
And grinded and just had that hustle, but again, feeling complete burnout, being overwhelmed. It didn't the money was coming, resenting the money that I was getting, and therefore blowing that money off on stupid stuff.
All day.
But yet keeping my competitive edge.
Yeah.
And finally realizing this is not worth it to me.
Yeah.
I want you to understand the science of making money. How can I make that a resource that works for me now?
Yeah.
And so talk to us about why the Trust the Beard organization is now about this creativity, this collaboration, this contribution, as opposed to its emphasis being on competition, because it's still a mortgage business.
100%.
Okay.
Yeah. So I can tell you that with the spirit of competition, what I realized is that, at least for me, right, that I was always limiting my imagination to what someone else had already done.
That's deep. Say that one more time.
Right. I was always limiting my imagination, right, to what someone else had already done.
I love that.
Right. And that's what competition is.
Absolutely.
Because you're chasing someone else's dream. And why would you ever give someone that responsibility? It's your dream. Make it bigger.
Right.
But you get stuck in this thing of like, oh, well, Michael Jordan has 6 rings. I got to get 7. Not to mention the fact that you've outscored Michael Jordan. Not to mention that your city loves you more than the city loves him, right? Like, there's all these other facets of what that can mean, but because you're measuring what success is to someone else, you limit your creativity.
Absolutely. I love that.
Right. And then the other part of it with the contribution, what I realized is that in that spirit of competition, you always feel like you got to be the one in the show. And sometimes the best thing that you could do is take a step back and let someone else shine. And just because they're shining doesn't mean that they're taking anything away from you. You just made the room brighter. Right. And then with the contribution part of it, you know, I've realized that in my career, I'm a better contributor than I am a creator. Mm. And in my contribution, if you come to me with an idea, I know that I have enough of a well of knowledge of experiences that have happened that I can contribute to make your idea that much better. So why would I compete with you if I'm trying to make you better?
And that contribution is collaborative.
100%.
With creativity.
100%.
So it's like this chain of positivity, really. Yeah. And in that kind of environment, because competitive environments are hostile,
yes,
right? Like you said earlier, it's very cutthroat. You know, in my world, for example, I had a really good friend of mine. We worked in the same field of work, and his need for the competitive, his need to be enough when he feels like he is not, led him down a pathway to betray me in business. And because I'm in a different mindset and mind frame, there was a part of me that was frustrated, yes, and angry, sure, but at the same time too saying, wow, that is his lack of for himself, yeah, that he feels that he can lose on something that could have been a win, all for the sake of trying to be enough. He's in that space. Yeah. But I love how what you just said with the, you know, my contribution, someone comes to me with their creativity, we collaborate, and it just becomes a win-win.
Yeah.
And how is that different than what you were doing? And again, you touched on it a little bit earlier with what Trust the Beard was before. And maybe it wasn't Don't Trust the Beard.
Yeah, it probably could have been that. It probably could have been that. But you know what it was, Lorraine, is that like, again, right, like this idea of success is that's the best place to hide because you're untouchable. And what a beautiful, you know, shiny coat of armor that you wear because you're successful, right? And then you don't really have to worry about too many other people's opinions.
Right.
So you could be whatever you want, right? Because I'm way more successful than you. I have more than you do. I'm this, you know. And that comes all the way back from like even in high school. Like I played at almost every sport except for soccer. You know, and in the sports that I played, I remember my coaches said that I wasn't a team player, but I'm on a team sport, you know, like, but I wanted to be the point guard. I wanted to run the show. It was me, you know, and that's how it went. And because I was the point guard, I picked that position on purpose. You know, in football, I had to curb my ego a little bit because there was kids that had a better arm than me, but I was competing for a quarterback spot. And they've ended up putting me in defense where I didn't even have to read a playbook. I just had to hit people, you know?
So that's the thing, too. It's like these things came naturally for you anyway. Right. So you didn't really have to, I don't want to say really grind and work, but you really didn't have to.
Yeah.
And I like how you say that, you know, people can hide behind success and hide in it. But the reality is sometimes the more successful we are, here's another seed, the more corrupt we can become.
Oh,
and the corruption that we have can really just erode. It's an erosion. And like you said, it creates divisiveness, but we hide in that success and it can turn us into very corrupt people. To me, the most important thing in life is reciprocity.
Yes.
And when you are fixated on being self-made, overly competitive to the point where your success makes you a corrupted person, mm-hmm, whether it means that you're mistreating people or you're doing things that are whatever, you know, people will go through great lengths to have that level of success.
Yeah.
But there is nothing like reciprocity. It is, to me, the most fulfilling thing because it is just the natural way of life, right? The tree gets from the earth, the right, leaves fall, the leaves produce fertile fuel for the tree to continue to thrive. And it's the cycle of give and take, or two things. So with what you're doing now, it sounds to me that there's a lot of reciprocity within your business. And how important is that for you and your organization now?
You know, I think that I think a lot of people make mistakes with their organizations because they think that the culture should be something where, you know, you get free snacks or you have like a ping pong table in your office or, you know, you have beanbag chairs, and they think that that's what's going to set the culture for their company. But I can tell you that something that I learned through the pandemic is that in this new wave of business that, you know, is coming out in the new world, quote, you know, like quote unquote, that we're living in, it's going to be the equity that you invest in your people that makes your company culturally
What do you
sound.
mean by that?
Like, I know that my team, right? Like I've sat with them on a personal basis to go over what their dreams are, because what I tell them is that no one ever woke up in the morning and said, I want to be a loan officer. That's not a career that someone like, puts his loan officer cape on and goes and changes the world. However, what I've looked at in my career is that this is a bridge to get you to what you want to really do. And if you do this well in the service of people, you can cross that bridge multiple times to do it. Like when I was a kid, I wanted to be a marine biologist. That was my thing.
That is so, I swear to God, I'm not joking, okay? I swear that was my career choice when I was a kid. Like I could talk about porpoises and mammals or, dolphins versus, oh my God, this is crazy. I've never heard anybody else say that, by the way. Yeah. So, okay, I just had to add that. That's
no, definitely.
so ironic. Okay, go ahead.
So Continue. For me, it was marine biology, but then life took a different turn. My mom got into some trouble and I had to stay and help my brother, so I gave that up. And the reality is that that's when I started to like pick apart how easy it is for me to make excuses to put my dreams on hold. Because my mom had never told me that she needed my help. But in my mind, I said, and then what does that do? Was it because I was scared to go take that opportunity and I found such a good reason not to do it that I didn't step into something that I was supposed to be doing? Right? So then in those things is where you really start to deconstruct the responsibility that you have in your life. Because for a while, I could tell you that I would blame my mom that I didn't become a marine biologist because she got into problems and I had to save my brother. But my mom never asked me for that. My mom, on the contrary, pushed me and told me, go get your dream. That's on you. Right. But I made a very easy excuse for me not to be the person that I wanted.
One of the parts of childhood trauma is fear of success.
100%.
And one of the things that I have discovered in my life in the last few years is that I have been incredibly successful being mediocre because I know how to make money and do it in fields that where the I'm competitive by nature. So I attracted myself into environments where I wasn't ever really doing what I felt was my call, my pulling to do. I was more so doing things that I knew competitively I could do. And so I made money. Yeah. I bought things like you said. Yeah. But it was all mediocre and it was my level of mediocrity because I knew I had a calling that I needed to fulfill, but my fear of not being enough and not belonging, it stifled my success in fulfillment. Yeah. I'm looking for success and fulfillment, and that ties into a calling that I wasn't attaching myself to because I had these things to distract until the world saw me as successful. And so it made me kind of tuck it to the side. And I love what you said, here I was helping my mom when she never asked me for the help. Mm-hmm. And it's very interesting that you say that because I think, God, that's so familiar. And I think a lot of people can relate to if they really tap in and say, what are the choices that I made in my mind, rescuing or helping that stifled something in my life? But can I blame that person, or really do I need to see my real reason why? Yeah.
And those are the hard moments because you have to admit that in that moment, like you have to admit that, no, you know what? It was me and I was scared. Right. And then that really helped me with the transition about like emotions, right? Because I realized that we only operate in those two. It's fear and love.
Correct. Yes.
Right. But we've gotten so clever at like describing what fear is that we have a lexicon of words that we can use to describe fear. But we're terrified to say that we're afraid.
Right.
So
absolutely.
So that's when I started like just trying to remove as many colorful words and just, is this a decision based in fear or is this a decision based in love?
Amen. That is so profound. It is something I tell people and teach people all the time that it is just those two options. Yeah. We can simplify it. Like you said, there can be a plethora of words that we can attach to fear because fear looks like a lot of things.
A ton.
Not just, the boogeyman. Right. There's a lot of things that we do that are a representation of the dark versus the light. Yeah. And the only option is love or fear and being really honest. I had wrote this poem actually years ago, and I described fear, as a child.
Oh, that's so good.
Yes. If I understood that my fear wasn't something that I need to shake off, brush off, but I saw it as my inner child. Yeah. That's trying to tap at me or pull on me to come down to its level and say, I'm sorry, what are you trying to tell me? Right. What is it that wasn't resolved in your life? And you saw your fear as a child, how would you handle it? You'd handle it more delicately, right? You'd pick it up and you'd say, come with me. I want to show you that you're going to be okay.
Oh, this is so good.
And,
Yes.
and that's really what fear is. It's our little child saying, no, I'm afraid. I'm afraid because this happened to me, because this
Right.
happened to me, because this happened to me. All right. So,
And then here, and even in that fear, right?
Yeah.
That was this moment that really, really helped me, because I realized that fear is one of the greatest acts of self-love.
oh, what do you
Because
mean by that? Yeah.
because there's preservation in fear.
Okay.
Right? That's the unknown. I'm afraid of that. I don't want to do that. I'm scared because of these past experiences that happened to me. I need to protect me. Right? So I don't want to step into that unknown.
I love
And
that.
then you realize that it's only love, Lorraine. Fear is just another manifestation of love that we create for ourselves because of the trauma and bullshit that has
Correct.
happened.
We're actually doing it to protect ourselves.
100%.
Yes.
So-
Oh, that's so deep.
When I had this moment, and it's crazy that you said that about the poem, because I literally had a visual. So as this progressed with like me, like really being accountable for my life, I realized that it was all me. I had to apologize to my ex-girlfriend. I told her, you didn't do anything wrong and it's on me, right? Like, I'm sorry for everything. It's my responsibility. Other girlfriends that I had in the past, even an ex-wife that I had to talk to and let her know, you know what? This was on me. Like, this was on me 100%. Like, and I'm sorry that I ever put you in these positions.
Forgiveness is very liberating when you forgive yourself first, and then you can be accountable enough to ask for forgiveness or and to say I'm sorry.
Yeah.
We're doing a segment on the show on forgiveness, and part of it is that, and being accountable, and being able to go to the people you've offended and hurt in your life and saying, it was me.
Yeah.
It validates the person incredibly. It sets them free in a lot of ways. And it also is incredibly liberating for yourself when you say, all right, we've got it like maybe 10 more minutes here.
Uh-oh.
So I want to ask you some great questions.
Sure.
Yeah. I would love for you to come back the next time you're in town. Because
Fingers crossed I'll be in town for a little while too.
oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, we'll have to talk about that off the camera.
Yeah.
All right. So I have 4 questions for you that I'd love for you to answer. With this journey, and I know there's so much more depth and layer to it that we can't possibly get into this hour, but with what you have shared, where does Jesus go from here, from this point in time?
I can tell you that because there was a moment in this journey where I got so depressed, Lorraine, that I thought about committing suicide. I could tell you that there was a moment when in this journey, like, I was broke. Like, I didn't have 2 pennies to rub together. Like, it was, I didn't even know how I was going to keep the lights on, because I was in my head so much, is that I realized that I have to give as much back as I've received in these last few months. So in the spirit of all this, I decided to take a meditative journey, and I went to Oaxaca. And there's a place in Oaxaca called San Jose del Pacifico. They're like cabins with no electricity. There's no gas. There's no light. There's no Wi-Fi. Very, very modest accommodations. You have to light your own fire every night, and if you want hot water, you got to wake up early so that you could put fire under the hot water, right? And it's a 7-day retreat where you have to be quiet, where you can't talk. And there's people around, and you have to eat. So if someone brings you food that you don't like, you got to figure out how to either realize that this is just fuel for your body, and maybe it doesn't require your opinion all the time, right?
Interesting.
So that journey really like put me in a different place where it's like, I know so much more now than I did before, that I would, if I didn't do better than what I was doing before, then I'm an asshole.
Okay, that's fair.
Like, so now what I want to do is, in the midst of our company, we've looked for ways to give back. So like, there's a nonprofit in Chicago. Well, it's all over the country. It's Boys and Girls Club.
Yes.
We love those guys.
They were my saving grace as a child, by the way.
We love them.
So we could talk about that as well. Yeah.
We put them on this thing called the Hero's Journey, where we're making a comic book for them so they can realize at a very early age that it's in us to
I love
create
that.
right?
Yes. Yes.
Right. So we've already got 2 pages of their comic book going, and we try to visit them on a regular basis just to interact with them. So that's a massive impact that I want to have in my community, right? When I went to Oaxaca, prior to that, to being this way, I realized that a lot of times when I would go on vacation, I was just doing the same things that I was doing here, getting drunk, not waking up on time, right? But now there was sun and there was a pool, so it was acceptable, right?
Right.
So in this vacation, what I did is I got connected with one of my uncles. He has a colleague in Mexico who is, her name's Sandra, so big shout out to Sandra. She loves us. She's an English teacher at an orphanage. And when I got there, she told me, like, do you mind if do you mind if I go a day early, to visit them? It's been closed for a while because of the pandemic. So I went to this orphanage, and initially I was going to bring them candies, but then when I saw like this need, I told, let's go to the grocery store, buy some food. And as I'm walking into the kitchen, I asked the director, do you mind if I cook for you guys? And he almost started crying, telling me, I haven't had time to be able to buy groceries for the kids, and we don't know what we're going to feed them today.
Wow.
And you're going to give me time and feed them? He's like, dude, 100% you can cook
I
for these
love
kids,
that.
And that feeling that I realize is there with these little kids, Lorraine, to me was like, this is what we got to spend our focus and our life on, is like
Right.
trying to improve the world and leave it a little bit better than what we found it. When I cooked for
And
them
we all have a part. We all can do a part, but
all
whether
day,
it be big or small.
all day.
Yeah.
Look at this little excursion that I did with these kids. It ended up costing me $200. I used to spend that at a bar at night. If not at, like in one night I would spend $200, if not more, right? And now to feed 90 kids,
Wow.
like what? Like that doesn't make sense, the value proposition of what it is, right? And now I can tell you that for us, what I realize is that with our success, money does play a big role in it. But the way that we've conceptualized money is it's your sixth sense. And it allows you to enjoy your 5 other senses that much more.
I love that.
So in this moment that we have an opportunity to help people get into houses, right? And from that money, realize that we have more than what we've ever needed and give back to communities that really need it. That's the goal. I want to change the world. I really want to change the world in this aspect that, you've prayed for moments in your life to have what you have now. How come you're not happy with it? And if you're not happy with it, before someone takes it away from you, try giving a little bit away.
Absolutely. Contribution and growth. Part of my certification training is through Tony Robbins' organization.
Nice.
And that's the 6 human needs. And the 2 most compelling are growth and contribution, because it is the epitome of all of them. When you are learning and educating and growing yourself spiritually, mentally, there is a fulfillment that takes place in that, right? And when you are also contributing, it is incredibly fulfilling to do so.
Yeah.
All right, so God, this is so good. My second question for you.
Yeah.
I know there's more you want. I want to get these questions because your answers are so good. What do you know now that you didn't know when your journey began? I know there's a lot of things, but what's the first one that comes to your mind?
That in order to heal, I would have to love the thing that I wished had never happened.
Ooh, say that one more time.
Yeah. That in order to heal, I had to learn to love the thing that I wish never happened.
Oh, God, that's so good. Yeah.
Yeah.
You want to expound on that? I mean, that's so deep.
Yeah. Again, it goes to like the theme of the responsibility of it, right? As a kid, my dad and I had a rough relationship. He was a mean person to me. He used to beat me like pretty bad, to the point where he would like hang me in the closet and beat me until like I would pass out, And these moments happened to me in my life because I remember like one day I wanted to eat before everybody else because I was hungry, and he was like, "Nah, you got to eat with everybody else, bud." And I climbed up on the counter and I ended up knocking the pot of beans over, and he screams like, "I'm gonna kill you!" He tells me in Spanish, "Te voy a matar. I'm gonna kill you." And I remember running around the house like terrified of like, death, even though I didn't know, I have no idea what that is, but this is worse than anything you've ever said, right? We had a little pool in the back that they were building out, and I ended up jumping in the pool, and he's like, "I'm not going to go in there after you. You're going to have to come out." Like, and that torment of him sitting at the edge of the pool.
Oh my God, yeah.
And the water getting colder, and me like, inevitably, yes, I'm going to have to go because I can't do it here, right? And only to know that ass whooping was coming, as soon as I got out of the pool. So not only am I in pain here, I'm about to be in worse. So he hangs me in the closet, beats me pretty bad, and I passed out. And I thought I was dead because when I woke up, he had hung me in the closet and it was dark. So I couldn't see anything,
Wow.
My little brother and sister, they came over and they, opened the door a little bit. And that changed my mindset in that moment because it's like, man, not even you could kill me. Right? And it created that competition, that fire of like me, like, And then I can tell you that I actively tried on multiple occasions to kill my dad as a 5-year-old. I used to grab scorpions that we were playing with, that were outside, and throw them in his bed when he was sleeping, because in my mind,
the scorpion was going to do the job.
Right. Like, and on top of it, you're the enemy, bro. You're always whooping my ass. Like, I can't have this in my life anymore,
So I'm sorry to interrupt you, but you say what you had said before you got into that story just one more time, because you said that you realized
that in order to heal, I had to love I had to love the thing that I wish had never happened most.
And when you share those stories, something so horrific like that, how do you do that?
So knowing all these things about my dad now, right? I can tell you that it happened last year for Father's Day. I got into bike riding pretty aggressively. That, it's a good place for me to zen out, because you gotta kind of focus just on bike, right? So I'm flying on my bike, and then I end up by the lake, and I go to meditate there, and I'm sitting there, and I'm really thinking about this forgiveness that I want so badly for all the terrible things that I've ever done in my life, right? And I can tell you, we can sit here and talk about them, whatever, but specifically say, like, just with relationships, and how I've been an abuser, of how I've been someone who's taken advantage of people, I'm a liar, a cheater, like all these things that, were there. And I want this forgiveness. I want forgiveness. I don't want that identifier anymore, right? So then it's like, well, you can never forgive if you haven't forgiven.
Right.
And then I sit with my dad in that moment, that I'm meditation, and I tell him, you know what? Not only do I forgive you, brother, but I love you, because I'm me, right? And whatever happened between you and my mom was what it was, but your, like, DNA, whatever, decided to come together and form me. So I'm probably the worst of you guys, but I could probably be the best of you guys too.
Right.
So then I forgave my dad, because I could wait for him and this is where the thought came in. Like, you could sit here and wait for your dad to rematerialize, because my dad ended up passing away. He hung himself. And then that's another part where you're like, what happened to you, right? And in that moment,
I lost my parent to suicide as well.
It's hard.
Yeah, it is.
So hard, So when this happens, right, like, I can picture myself as him in the rafters of a garage, and that moment when it's around your neck, and this is it, brother.
Right.
And having that fear, and what pushed you so much that you were there. And then now, because I went through those experiences myself, I can feel that same pain that you had. So what were you dealing with, bro?
It's like your worlds became combined. They were much more intertwined than you had realized.
100%.
And again, we're doing a segment on forgiveness, and we did a segment last week on forgiving our fathers, and that was something that was shared. It's that we have been offended and offenders, and in order for us to really understand forgiveness, is to know that there are things that we need to be forgiven. Like, there's things that I have done that I want people to forgive me for, but how do I command that or request that if I have an unwillingness to forgive my offenders as well?
100%.
And it's hard sometimes to do when you're experiencing like what you've experienced, because we have this idea that if we hold on to if we hold on to it, it keeps that person wrong.
Right.
But yet it's a trap. Yeah. Right. So wow.
And with that part, that I'll tell you, is that forgiveness then was like one of the most liberating moments in my life. That I was able to sit with this. And then I can tell you the gratitude that I found in it is that I know, because I went through those experiences, my kids are never going to deal with that. And I broke that cycle of getting, of that being the norm, of kids getting their butts kicked when they're misbehaving. I'm going to break that cycle when I have my kids. And I'm so grateful for that my kids are never going to have to experience any of the shit that I did.
So you found the gratitude, you found the opportunity in your opposition.
100%.
Yeah, I love that. Okay, my next question. You ready? What advice would you give to someone who's listening that feels lost? And I hear this a lot. They could be like, I hear Jesus, I hear what he's saying, but I don't know how to get there. I don't know where to start. I don't know where to begin. You began because you got, inadvertently put into a psychiatric ward. But for people who are not there, how do you help a person who's lost? Where would you tell them to start with their own journey?
So, again, I can only tell you, like, for me, right, what it was for me. And what it was for me was that I figured that if I did the hardest things first, that the rest of the little nonsense that was in my life would only seem as little nonsense in my life.
Okay.
So I picked the things that were the hardest, like my ego. Like, why do I have such a big ego, right? And then it led me down that path of like, well, it's because as a kid, you never felt like you were enough. And then one of the times when I was in San Jose, I did a meditation for 14 hours where you had to stand up.
Oh, wow.
Like, and you're there quiet listening to this, and your back starts to spasm and everything starts to hurt. And, and I went to a place in my mind where it was this dark hallway. And as I'm running down this hallway, I can hear a little boy crying. And as I get closer, it gets darker, if you can imagine that. And it keeps getting darker and darker. And then finally I see like the little shadow of what looks like a child in the corner. And I pick up this little child, and then he turns around and looks at me, and he has this mask on of like a devil. and his horns are huge, and he's making his big mean faces, and he's pushing me away, right? And in that moment, I have an option to leave him there or take him with me. And that's when I realized that it's us. We're still kids. This just grew up.
Right, right.
And the part where you left that last moment is where you've been at for the last whatever amount of years.
Absolutely.
And I saw that in myself about like every time that I was afraid of something, I would put a different adjective instead of fear, right? And I would then bring my shield of success, right? Or bring the shield of like that, I had a lot of girls, or that I had a nice car, or whatever it was, right? Because whatever this was terrifying me so much that I had to, like subsidize it with whatever else I had kind of gotten good at. And I never really faced that. And that's one of the things that I'll tell people, like, or I'll tell, because you avoid the problem doesn't mean that you've solved the problem. You eliminating something from your life doesn't mean that you've resolved what the issue was. You're just pushing it down further.
Right.
And what will happen is that thing will represent something else in your life later that was going to be 100 times harder than what it is right now, and you could deal with it.
100%.
So
that is so true.
Don't run. For me, what it was is like, eat it. Eat the hardest thing first. Get rid of the hardest thing first. And it was that. It was the abuse with my father. It was abuse with my father that really created, a very negative person in my life, where even my brother and I, didn't get along. And I had a tough conversation with my brother because I told him, I know that you don't like me. I know that you hate me because I was a bully with you when I was a kid, and I'm sorry for that. And my brother and I had a pretty in-depth conversation about that. But then what I told him was like, you think that I was a tormentor towards you, but imagine if I would have turned my attention to you instead of my dad and trying to kill you. Like, you were a little baby. You would have never been able to stop me.
Right.
And then I asked my brother, and then he's like, well, I just don't know what you went through. And I started to tell him, and he's like, I don't know how you went through that, So even in that, Lorraine, I'm grateful that I was tasked with that, and that my brother and sister never had to experience those things. So I find more gratitude in the pain that created me who I am now.
Yeah, because it brings it to a point, right? We can see our journey of things that have happened, and we've all had things that have happened. Yeah. Some people much more horrific than others. If you're measuring it, but pain is pain, right? Suffering is suffering. But if we choose at some point in our life to say, well, what was the lesson? What can I learn from the experience?
Yes.
Because I can't change what has happened, but I can decide how I'm going to let what has happened dictate my life.
Yeah.
Okay, so before we close, I always like to, at the end of every show, give like a final thought for the people who are out there listening. So if you look at your camera, and someone's listening, I know there's people who can really get an incredible amount of value from the things. I know I'm getting the value from the things that you've shared today.
Appreciate that.
And again, I would love for you to come back because there's so many layers.
There is.
The heroes thing with the comic books and all the other amazing contributing that you're doing to your community. We could talk all day about all this stuff. But what would you say that you would like to close with, that you would like to share with someone as they maybe are looking or seeking to get some epiphanies in their own journey, if you will?
It's a big responsibility, right? That someone would ever consider my words to be valuable enough for them to do it. But what I can tell you is the mentality that we often get into is that our problems are unique to us. And in that uniqueness, we find like this identity of like we're special. And that creates isolation as opposed to creating some type of more inclusive environment. Because there's no way that you could understand what I went through. How would you ever know that? Or what do we have in similar so much that you wanted to be a marine biologist and I wanted to be a marine biologist, right? But because we get isolated in this idea that our problems are unique to us, that it's only us suffering, then we block out the rest of the world. But I could promise you that if you're like a stone throw away from someone who is dealing with something very similar.
It's happening right now. You're sharing your story that you and I've hung out many times in those environments that we've talked about, or partying and having a good time. But we've never had this depth of a conversation to say, wow, you wanted to be a marine biologist? Wow, your dad committed suicide also?
Right.
Wow, you suffer from abuse? You were an abuser? These are things that, wow, your pain is very similar to my pain.
Right.
And how we overcame is these commonalities that it comes through separating yourself from being so special to your story.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's hard for us to deal with. But realize this, that in our likeness is what makes us special.
Right.
Because now, instead of me seeing you as like someone who's a threat to me, you know, your little battery matches my little battery. Together we can power up a lot of things, right?
Right. Love
Because we've
that.
been through certain things. So then instead of it being afraid, and now imagine, right, like all the times that we did hang out, right? If we would have ever had a conversation like this, how much further would both of us be on our journey now?
Absolutely. 100%.
But is that fear of like, she's never going to understand me. Or he's
Or I'm going
never
to be judged for this
Right.
story, or it's going to take away this suit of armor called success. And,
Right.
You know, it's going to make me flawed.
100%.
Exactly. Yeah.
So that's the one suggestion that I would give you, is that, you know, don't feel alone. Like, there's someone who is going through a very similar situation that you are right now. And together, right, you guys can collaborate on a really good solution, you know?
Well, thank you so much. It has been an honor and a pleasure, and I really appreciate your vulnerability, sharing your story. I am, you know, I don't want to sound condescending, but I'm very proud of you. We talked many moons ago, and I had a little bit of insight to
Oh
you.
man, I wanted to tell that story.
I was a little crazy that
I'm gonna
day.
have to come back.
But to watch your journey, I already knew. There was a glimpse, there was something that I saw in you that I'm like, he doesn't see it yet, but I always had faith for you.
Oh, I love that.
And
Thank
to
you.
see what you're doing is very touching. And I love that you're sharing that vulnerability with the world, regardless of what people think all kinds of things when you're sharing that much raw vulnerability, emotion. But I'm so honored that you came here today. So
appreciate it.
for those of you who want to get in touch with Jesus, you can reach him at jesus@trustthebeard.org. You can go to his website as well, which is trustthebeard.org. And definitely check out his Instagram, which again is trustthebeard.org. You'll see his follow or his information on the show as well. And again, we are also on YouTube. So, dun, 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 please hit the subscribe button. Give us a thumbs up. Send us your comments if you have content that you would like for us to talk about in regards to mindset. Love to hear from you. And thank you once again for watching another episode of The Mindsetters. Until next time, ciao.